Please be seated.
Yes, Ms. Finesse.
Thank you, Your Honour. I call Francis Sheehan.
Will you take an oath on the Bible or an affirmation?
Affirmation, thank you.
Yes, would you repeat after me? I do solemnly, sincerely and truly
I do solemnly, sincerely and truly
declare and affirm that the evidence I shall give in this Royal Commission
that the evidence I shall give in this Royal Commission
shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Thank you. Take a seat. Yes, Ms. Finesse.
Thank you, Your Honour. There's some water there for you, Mr. Sheehan, if you need it.
Yes, thank you.
Would you tell the Royal Commission your full name?
Francis Patrick Sheehan.
And you're retired, Mr. Sheehan, aren't you?
I am retired, yes.
You made a statement dated the 30th of April 2015 to the Royal Commission?
I did, yes.
And the contents of that are true, correct?
Yes.
Thank you. I tender that statement.
It'll be Exhibit 2822.
Now, Mr. Sheehan, you're also involved in a submission to the Royal Commission from Moving Towards Justice in February 2015?
That's correct.
And a copy of that submission has been tendered, Your Honour, and appears behind a tab that I will...
In the tender bundle, is it?
Yes, advise you of in due course.
Yes, thank you.
Now, Mr. Sheehan, you describe in your statement your experience with the Catholic Church growing up. Would you like to tell us about that?
Yes, well, I was part of a traditional Catholic family that lived in the country just outside Ballarat in the 1950s, and I was born in 1937, but, 40s, 50s, 60s were all very much in the tradition of the church, and my family was observing the Catholic faith. I wouldn't say they were over-religious by any means, but certainly the observance was regular and strict, I guess.
What schools did you go to?
The school, I went to the local Catholic school. There's only one in Dunstone, actually, St Brendan's, and I went there till grade 6, and subsequently went to St Paul's Technical College in Ballarat.
Now, you've said in your statement when you first learned about child sexual abuse committed by Catholic clergy and religious was in 2011?
Yes, I suppose I had heard before, but it hadn't created a very big impression on me at that, in the earlier stages. It just seemed to be that sort of one-off thing, but subsequently I found out that wasn't the case. 2011 would have been the beginning of that process.
And what did you do thereafter in relation to your work dealing with survivors of child sexual abuse by clergy and religious?
Yes, well, initially this group that I'm president of began as a result of a discussion with a friend of mine who's a friend of hers had, the son of a friend of hers had been abused, and we talked about just what could be done as lay people in the church, and eventually a few more people were involved, and on again from there we started a small group that had its main objective to try and establish contact with victims, survivors of the abuse, even though at that stage, I guess, our knowledge about it was relatively limited. And over time, it became a very quick learning curve.
What was the involvement of the church with establishing the group you've referred to?
Well, we made an agreement very early that our group would not be directed by or formed by the official church, if I could put it that way. We wanted to retain our independence of the institutional church, if you like, although we've had obviously contact through the time with the church authorities, and but we set out a series of objectives, and we formed a memorandum of understanding that would at least give us the intent of having independence anyway, and work through our own objectives then.
Would you describe your group Moving Towards Justice as an initiative of the church? No. It was initiative.
No, it was an initiative of lay people within the church, I guess. But early membership didn't include only the Catholic Church; it included other denominations, and still we have a member who's part of another denomination. Did
early membership include any person who held a position within the church?
No, although we have priests and sisters as part of our group, I wouldn't say that they fitted into that category, no.
So you've been president of Moving Towards Justice since 2012?
Yes, that's correct.
And what sort of work are you currently doing now in relation to survivors?
Well, initially we tried to do a number of things, I guess, but now we've settled down towards two things. One being the Quilt of Hope, which was an initiative of some of the women in the group, and it's a quilt made up of patches, I think they're called, of about 200 millimetres, and it was put together by a group of the ladies, particularly one person who was a quilter, and it's been a very good symbol, I guess, of the sort of work we tried to do. That was making contact with victims and the families of victims, and we've been able to. That's one thing, and we've been able to. It's gone to Warrnambool for display. There's been invitations from other parishes around the place. So I suppose in essence that means that and it's true that we were trying to gain greater contact with the congregations of the Catholic Church to make them more aware of the issues that were involved. And also one of the hopes we have is to establish some sort of a memorial at the Botanical Gardens in Ballarat.
How far have you got with the memorial?
Only at the very early stages. We've had discussions with the Friends of the Botanical Gardens as the group that are involved there, and but nothing has been set in concrete at all. The ideas are still floating.
Have you sought any funding to assist you with the memorial?
No, not at this stage, but I was offered the possibility of some funds only just recently, so we might take that up.
Who offered you those funds?
Beg your pardon?
Who offered you those funds?
It's a trust in the care of one person from an organisation apparently that was closed down some years ago, and this person is the only one who is able to gain access to it and has offered us some funding.
Will you tell the Royal Commission about the work you're doing with CASA?
Yes, well, CASA was one of the organisations that in early days, because we had a program we called Survivor Packages, we had contact with CASA because our idea was that the people that were going to receive the packages should have counselling as part of the process. So we had recommendations from CASA and from Relationships Australia to provide those packages. I think we spent something like $26,000, and we were very keen to observe the role of confidentiality to make sure that was the case. So only probably 2 or maybe 3 members of our group were entrusted with that work.
And you still now have an ongoing relationship with referring people to CASA?
Yes, I suppose our most recent contact was through what we call the Christmas packages, where we put together hampers and some actual cash at Christmas time on the recommendation of CASA as to who should receive them. But that's probably the most recent contact.
How did you and how do you identify victims or survivors to contact and offer services to?
Well, through the counselling services mostly, although there are some individuals who have come to us, and at the present time there are probably 3 or 4 people that some of our members have direct contact with.
So I take it you would welcome anyone coming forward to you who identifies a victim or survivor?
Yes, as long as they feel comfortable, we will. And yeah.
Now, in terms of the church, What assistance have they provided moving towards justice today?
Well, the survivor packages was one of our biggest financial outlays, and we received $10,000 from the Diocese of Ballarat and another 10 from the Christian Brothers, which we distributed according to the system of financial, or the survivor packages. But I guess, the contact has been, other than that, the contact has been on a more meeting-by-meeting basis, discussing the various things that we believe ought to be part of the process within the church.
Is there anything that you've sought from the diocese or the Christian Brothers that you haven't received?
Not directly, no. We have views that we thought that the church and the Christian Brothers might have taken up a more pastoral approach to things, because in our experience, and while it's not a wide experience, it wouldn't be true of every case, but in our experience, the pastoral dimension has been something that hasn't been fully explored, in my view, or our view.
What would you like to see in terms of the pastoral response from the diocese or Christian Brothers?
I think probably someone or some group of people ought to be given that particular task, not necessarily to go out chasing work, but at least be available for people if they wanted to take up that experience or role, if they wanted to be part of a pastoral care system. Then I think it should be made available and publicly made available to the people who then wish to, in their own time, to take it up. But I certainly wouldn't see it as something that was taken, people were taking public positions on it by public, making it a requirement or anything like that. It must definitely come from the survivor and the victim themselves, but at least it should be available in a more public way.
What position or level in the church do you think should play that pastoral role or be available to provide pastoral care?
Oh, I think it has to come from the leadership of the church.
Who do you see as the leadership of the church?
Oh, well, I guess the bishop and hierarchy are given that particular responsibility, and I guess it has to come from them, really. But not necessarily carried out by them, but certainly the leadership should come from there.
Is this something that your group or you've discussed with the leadership of the church?
Yes, we have.
With what response?
Not with a great enthusiasm at this stage, although I think the idea is welcomed, but the action probably hasn't taken effect at this point.
Can you see any barriers to it happening from your perspective?
Not really. No, not really. I don't see barriers. No.
Now, in the submission that you've provided, which is Exhibit 28.3 at tab 188, you express some views as to why the Ballarat Diocese has been the subject of such a large number of claims and convictions. Do you have a copy of that with you, Mr. Shearer?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
It's page 11.
Yeah.
What thoughts do you have on why Ballarat Diocese is in the position it is in?
I think it comes pretty much from the unquestioning position that a lot of Catholics have had of priests and their role in the church. In my growing up time, I guess the of Catholics have had of priests and their role in the church. Nowadays that's not the case, of course, but and therefore there was sort of a differential attitude adopted to the priest. I think that's partly to do with it. There's also, I think, that the procedures and systems of the church have not lent themselves to being able to, or to have lent themselves to this sort of secrecy, I suppose you'd call it, that has been around the whole issue up until recent times anyway.
You're referring there to the papal decree. Do you see that in your second paragraph under why Ballarat Diocese? And you say there that the decree, the 1922 decree, which was in force until 1983, was that allegations of sexual abuse of children by priests and religious be dealt with internally and in strict and absolute secrecy. Do you see that?
Yes.
Is that what you were referring to in terms of the processes of the Church?
Yeah, that's right. Mm.
The matters you've referred to, the deference to priests and the declaration, apply beyond Ballarat, don't they? They would apply to any community, particularly in the 50s and 60s and 70s. Why particularly do you think Ballarat?
I suppose it was really the issue of how Ballarat was quite a Catholic place in its demography, and I think that because of the other things I've said, that played a part too. That there was quite a large grouping of Catholic people in the Ballarat region and in the diocese generally, I think. And that probably was the reason, or one of the reasons. I can't say that it was definitely all of the reason.
If you turn to the next page of your submission, you refer to Bishop Mulcairn's having set up a special issues committee in the 1990s. What's the relevance of that committee, do you think, to why Ballarat is in the position it's in?
Well, it's hard to say that, to be honest with you. I mean, there was a group set up by the Australian Catholic Bishops' Conference that had the same name, pretty much, and it was overridden by, as we understand it, by a decree from the Vatican, and was never put into position, even though the recommendations would have seemed to have taken the issue on board more fully than what has been the case. I guess the same thing applied there, that the what's it called, the Special Issues Committee probably had defined their position because of that same circumstance.
Now, on the next page, you say what still needs to be done, and the first is a proactive approach by the diocese. And is that similar to what you said earlier about more pastoral care being available for those who want it?
Yes, and I think it has to be more embracing of the whole issue.
The second matter you referred to is towards healing. What's your concern with towards healing?
Well, our experience, as I said before, I think is that it was, while it had a compensation dimension to it, and may have had a pastoral dimension to some people, but in our experience, some of the people that have dealt with towards healing have never had any follow-up, or their experience has been negative. And it does seem to me that whole approach needs to be remedied or revised or reviewed, so that it brings on that level of pastoral care that seems to be missing in general.
Have you been able to follow the work that the Royal Commission's done in the area of redress, Mr. Sheen?
Yes, at not a close level, but redress certainly is one of the issues that we believe has to be part of any future position or recommendation. In our experience with the small experience of the survivor packages, that it is something that we believed ought to take place insofar as the lump sums are concerned. Even though that may be necessary, we haven't got a fully thought out position on this, I have to say. But the fact is that the ongoing payments that we were giving seemed to be more beneficial than any lump sum. But of course, we had to curtail that for a couple of reasons. One of them being that it was difficult to keep going financially. The other being that Centrelink payments might have been, we were advised that they may have been affected by what seemed to be an income.
I take it that you would support a scheme which was administered by someone other than the church?
Oh, yes, definitely.
Thank
yeah.
you. Thank you. I have nothing further.
Yes, does anyone else have any questions? No, thank you, Mr Sheehan. Thank you for your evidence. You're excused.
Thank you.
Your Honour, I call Andrea Lockhart.
Lockhart, would you take an oath on the Bible or affirmation?
An affirmation.
Would you repeat after me, please? I do solemnly, sincerely and truly
I do solemnly and sincerely and truly
declare and affirm
declare and affirm
that the evidence I shall give in this Royal Commission
that the evidence that I shall give in this Royal Commission
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the
and
truth.
nothing but the truth.
Yes, thank you. Take a seat. Yes, Ms Vanessa.
Thank you, Your Honour. Would you tell the Royal Commission your full name,
Andrea Genevieve Lockhart.
your occupation, Ms Lockhart?
I'm the Senior Counsellor at Ballarat Centre Against Sexual Assault.
It's been commonly referred to as CASA.
CASA, yep.
Thank you. Now, you've made a statement dated the 11th of May,
Yes, I
and
did.
the contents of that are true and correct?
Yes, it is.
I tend to that.
Exhibit 2823.
Thank you. Perhaps you could tell us about your professional background before you came to CASA, Ms Lockhart.
So I've been at CASA for approximately 10 years. Prior to that, I worked in the Juvenile Justice Program for the Department of Human Services for 10 years.
And you're a social worker
Yes,
by training.
Yep, I'm a qualified social worker.
What does Ballarat CASA provide in terms of services?
So Ballarat CASA is this state government funded specialist sexual assault service. We've got many centres across the state and we provide free counselling and support for survivors of sexual assault, and we also provide support for their families and support people. We also have a program where we work with young people up to the age of 15 who've exhibited sexually abusive behaviours and under the age of 10 with problem sexual behaviours. So we've sort of got a broad range of services. Yes.
Is your only source of funding the Victorian Government?
Yes, it is.
In terms of the dealing with children who've exhibited sexually abusive behaviours, who are they generally referred from to come to you?
A mix within the community, but a lot of our work is linked with child protection, and so particularly those older children. And we also we're also funded to provide therapeutic treatment orders, and that's through the Children's Court.
So the Child Protection organisation in Victoria is in contact with you about children they identify who are within their system who might need your assistance?
Yes, and police and schools and other sort of welfare services, and parents can refer to.
How big is the centre?
Our centre?
Yeah. How many staff do you employ?
I'll have to look. So we have a manager, Shireen Gunn, and we have 11 counsellors and 2 administrative people.
Do you turn many people away?
No, not at all. We don't see adults who are sexual offending, so we make assessments around that.
For those who come to you, you have sufficient resources to provide what assistance they need?
I'm sure my manager would say we could always do with more resources, but especially around the Royal Commission clients, we've prioritised them because we see it's such a significant issue here in the community.
If you don't have sufficient resources to see a person who contacts you, is there somewhere else you can refer them?
We don't refer out to other, because this is our specialist areas. CASAs have been working for over 30 years in this area, so we've got training, expertise and a support system where we understand the impact of sexual assault. That's the work we do. So our experience is that sometimes those issues aren't addressed when they go to external agencies. They look at what's on the surface. So,
how do you work with moving towards justice?
so they contacted me, I think it was and through Peter Blenheim, the beginning of 2013. And so I was really involved in attending the meetings. Peter was, from memory, I think he was elected on the executive and I was his backup person if he wasn't able to attend. But my role mainly was about trying to inform them about the impact of sexual assault and I guess being that sort of expert. And later on, particularly referring clients for the survivor packs that Mr. Sheehan spoke about.
You describe in your statement at page 2 the impact of institutional child sexual abuse.
Yep.
Can you tell us about that impact?
Well, the impacts, I think what I wanted to portray is that it's long-term. It's not something that people suddenly get over, and clients are often told, forget about it and move on. And I know that they would if they could, but the impacts are multifaceted. It affects their relationship, intimacy, sense of self-worth, employment, substance abuse. So, and if you listen to the witnesses, they all describe those same impacts. Yeah.
So in your experience, to provide someone with 5 or 10 series of counselling sessions wouldn't be sufficient?
Absolutely not. And anecdotally, I've heard people say, particularly, with the Towards Healing program, when they're offered 5 sessions or 10 sessions, whatever they are, and they have those sessions and then they don't feel better, it actually makes them feel worse because, there must be something really wrong with me because I'm not fixed yet. We don't have a time limit on the clients we see at Ballarat Casa, so some of the people that I've worked with, would be a few years of work before, and that's consistent with the level of trauma they've experienced as in childhood.
You refer on page 3 to the fact that many male survivors have told you that they struggle with the perception that abused men will go on to abuse others. And then you talk about your experience that isn't the case.
Well, I'm running a support group, or co-facilitating a support group, and there's 18, 20 men who haven't gone on to abuse others. We wouldn't be working with them. And but it's such an impact. I remember one man who said his psychiatrist told him that he would definitely go on to abuse. And so that impacted on his ability to bathe his children, to even hold them. And that was such a grief and loss around that. And I would say most of the men in the group have that fear because people out in the community believe that. So it actually prevents them from disclosing too and seeking help. It silences them.
The group you just referred to, is that the men's therapy group you referred to in your statement? So you started that in 2012?
In 2012 we had sort of a short-term smaller group and that finished, and then in 2013 we sort of midway through the year we started the group that is now still running fortnightly and is continuing to grow. Yeah.
How does that group work?
So we always start with food because that sort of
Everyone likes food.
Absolutely, and keeps people, just they feel safe, and it's sort of a safe way to start. And sometimes we have themes. So just recently we've done a bit of a brainstorm, and we've got some themes we're going to explore, which is conflict management, relationships, self-esteem, those sorts of issues. Sometimes, particularly around the Royal Commission stuff, it's about what's happening here and now and coping with the impacts of what's going on. Yeah, so we're kind of very fluid, but I guess we sort of have a few rules, which is we don't try to have too much content about the abuse. So what's happened in these hearings is that a lot of the men here had not heard each other's stories before. So because it's not the stories that's important, it's the impacts. And so the group is really talking about the impacts of the abuse.
How do men who are interested join that group?
Word of mouth. So it seems like bit by bit, and people are hearing about it. We've had newspaper articles about it. Some of the men have actually participated in the interviews, and one of the men in the group had agreed to be interviewed, and another man said he carried the Courier article around for a few weeks or even a couple of months, and then said, well, if he can do it, I can do it. So that second man is now coming regularly. So it is that sort of spreading, yeah. And I'm involved on a different level with other CASA counsellors in Melbourne who run groups, and yeah, the numbers we get in Ballarat is, so much more than traditionally. Men's groups are usually quite small and they struggle to get people there.
Why do you think you've got greater numbers?
Because of the issues here, definitely, because the institutional abuse the other councillors weren't seeing as much as we are in Ballarat. And because of Mr Blenheim's network, because that sort of fed into it. And I think because they trusted Peter, that sort of was the conduit to coming into it, because it's sort of, if he thinks it's okay, it must be okay, because he's so well regarded by the other survivors.
Is there any resource or other matter that would assist you in providing the services you do that you don't currently have?
Well, it is expensive to run the group, if that's what you're sort of asking.
No, I'm just
the cost
giving
of it.
you the magic wand, really. What is it that you would like that you don't currently have?
I think resources, well, see, I'm not the manager, so those sort of budgetary things, that's not my realm, but yeah, I think that we can always have more resources. Most of my time has been centred around this, and even though we weren't funded for it, we weren't going to say we're not going to do that work. And initially, when the funding was raised, and there were some articles in the Courier about Ballarat CASA not being funded, people responded, some of our clients said, oh, we can't come to you anymore. Well, we would never turn them away, because that's their core work, because it is sexual assault. That's what we do. And so whether it's in families or in institutions, it is all sexual assault, and the impacts are the same.
Page 8 of your statement, you refer to towards healing and the medical model of access to counselling.
Yeah.
What's your view on access to counselling?
I think people find it really difficult to argue for their rights if their rights have been overridden as a child, if they believe that the abuse is their fault. So to actually believe that you have a right to get help, that's a big step. So the mental health access plan means that people actually have to go and argue for a right to get help. So that's a big step, even to tell your GP. A lot of the men in the group haven't even told their GP. And look, some, unfortunately, when they have, again, they get that, well, you should just get over it and don't worry about it. So those things impact on it. So I think the ability to just provide ongoing counselling that's people don't have to actually argue for enables that healing journey, because they feel, they don't have to argue their right for it.
The GP approach you referred to, that's part of the Medicare model?
Yes, yeah.
Thank you. Now, in terms of the engagement with the Christian Brothers and the Catholic Diocese of Ballarat, you referred there to, in early 2003, you and others thought it might be helpful to get some support from the church.
Yeah.
What did you do to get that support?
So we had meetings with Mr Shane Wall from the Christian Brothers, Mark Bromley and Justin Driscoll from the diocese. Mark's the business manager, I understand. Peter Blenheim and Andrew Collins, myself and manager Shireen Gunn. And so we talked about setting up, I guess, a more fluid, smoother process, because I think as one of the witnesses said yesterday, it's really hard directly to go to the church and ask for help. So having me as sort of the middle means that that's less confronting. And even having to go to the building, I think that's a lot for people who've been abused in that institutional setting to actually walk in the building. So we set up a process. It was a few meetings, and we talked about what sort of things meant, we thought would need it, and it's about things like pain relief, massage, though very few clients take up the massage, very few clients want to be touched, so even though massage would be helpful for them, but I'm just trying to think what else, access, support for funding for transport. So we've got a few people that come from the other side of Ararat, one that comes from the other side of Geelong to the group. So because they feel so connected by that, it's worth the few hours journey. So I'm getting support to help those people come into the group.
So what you were seeking from the church that you refer to in your statement was funding to provide the sorts of services you've spoken of? Yeah,
the extra things for to help their healing. Yeah.
What was the response of the church?
Look, it's been really good actually. So Mark is very prompt. So what happens now is people healing. Yeah.
What was the response of the church?
Look, it's been really good actually. So I would make recommendations of what I thought they would need, like
transport.
Yeah, whatever. And then Mark would approve it, or Mr. Shane from the Christian Brothers, because if we sort of identified there are either Christian Brothers or diocese cases. And then once that's approved, the clients bring in the receipts and I scan it, email it to Mark, and it's paid in their bank account the next day. So that's working really well. I guess my only comment that I made was that it's a 3-month program, and then we have to reapply after 3 months. And back to what I originally said, that the issues are long term, and people, you can't just have a quick fix and things are better.
What period of time would you prefer other than a 3-month limit?
Unlimited. And it's the same with counselling. There's this view that people, if we pay for counselling, they'll go forever. But people use counselling as they need. It's not, I don't think people, it's not enjoyable. It's not always fun. It's actually, most men would say it's hard work. So they use it because they need it. Yeah. And it's the same with those other things.
So a service whereby the men could choose to come and go as they needed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You refer on page 10 of your statement to the funding for a case manager at the Ballarat Casa.
Sorry.
No, take your time, have some water.
Yes, we had meetings with Sharon Knight and Anne Barker, with Mr. Blenheim and Andrew Collins.
With what result?
That they made a commitment to I guess explore it through their government levels, and prior to the election, Sharon made a promise to fund Ballarat Casa and for 4 years, and so and once they were elected, the commitment's been made. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Lockhart. I have nothing further on.
Does anyone else have any questions?
I have one question.
Yes.
Lockhart, my name's Hanscom. I appear for a witness. My name's Hanscom. I appear for a witness given the pseudonym BAS. He has given evidence in this commission, and he has said that in 2009 he went to the men's group at Casa and he found it was very unhelpful because it was just people reiterating what they had been through. Mm-hmm. If I understood your evidence correctly, that's not any longer what you do. Is that correct?
No, and do you want me to speak particularly to that?
Yes, to that. What do you now do?
Oh, well, but sometimes, I guess, sometimes there are some really heavy times in the group, and when people themselves have experienced something difficult, and it ebbs and flows, and the men support each other through it. But I guess we can't be cheery all the time either. So it's actually understanding the impact of the abuse. Yeah.
Yes. but you're interested now in the new men's group
Yes.
in things which will help people move forward.
Absolutely. And also, we're quite clear about setting with the rules that, I guess we call them rules, but that if people have concerns and if we talk about it sort of regularly, you know, don't forget you can talk to one of us afterwards or to your counsellor. So we've set up that as a safety net for people.
So it's really a much more sophisticated program now than when it first began.
Yes.
Yes, if the Commission please.
Anyone else have any questions? Very well, thank you, Ms Lockhart. Thank you for your evidence. You're excused.
Your Honour, Andrew Collins is a witness who we had proposed to call next. He has provided us with an additional statement which deals with a number of matters that Mr Gray's clients need to address and can't do it at this stage. So, notwithstanding the time, if we could take the luncheon adjournment. The second witness is flying in today and will not be available till before 2:30. So perhaps if I can ascertain over lunch whether Mr Collins can be called before that. If not, the adjournment I would seek would be till 2:30, but I'll communicate with Your Honours and Commissioner and others interested in the hearing room.
Very well. We'll adjourn at this stage.
Thank you.